Is there a reason, though, Sarah, that you can't specifically call out Hamas and the mounting evidence now over 7 weeks that Israeli investigators have collected, that we've shown our viewers about the atrocities they committed specifically on October 7th? Because I think that's the crux of the issue here. It's not just condemning sexual violence against women and in any war in general. It's specifically what occurred on October 7th, perpetrated by Hamas.
Indeed. UN Women always supports impartial, independent investigations into any serious allegations of gender-based or sexual violence.
So we all know that the UN sucks, but wow, they suck so much that UN Women is coming under fire for refusing to condemn Hamas for the brutal and unimaginable rape, torture, and mutilation of women and girls as part of their horrific attack on October 7th. Now, at this point, if you don't believe that these attacks actually happened, you're either living under a rock, or you're a shameless modern-day Holocaust-denying anti-Semite that's somewhere between Owen Jones and Nick Fuentes.
The other day, a member of Congress sent me a clip from back in her home district where a Muslim American leader was attacking her, accusing her of lying because she had mentioned that Hamas had committed rapes against civilians on October 7th. Of course, it is not a lie. It is an ugly fact, though the rapes have not gotten as much attention as the murders. Israeli authorities have only recently begun their investigations into these atrocities, but sadly, often the evidence has been lost along with the victims. A warning, the story we're about to show you contains graphic content, and it assuredly will be disturbing to most viewers.
In the aftermath of the October 7th attacks by Hamas, Israel's focus immediately turned to war and to identifying the bodies of those slaughtered by Hamas in Israel's largest mass casualty attack. But now Israel is launching an investigation into allegations of rape and other forms of sexual violence on that deadly day. Israeli police are starting to build rape cases, relying on eyewitness testimony, video, and forensic evidence, as well as Hamas interrogations. Dr. Kochav El-Kayam Levy, named chair of the Civil Commission on October 7th crimes by Hamas against women and children, points to one reason why the investigations have been so difficult.
We'll never know everything that has happened to them. We know that most women who were raped and who were sexually assaulted were also murdered. And it will take time, even in other atrocities, it takes time until the crimes against women are revealed, until survivors even share their stories.
Still, CNN found witnesses to the atrocities and their aftermath. G, a paramedic in Israel's elite 669 Special Tactics Rescue Unit, went house to house in Kibbutz Be'eri, one of the sites of the worst massacres. He did not want to be identified on camera.
While we're storming through those houses, one of the doors I open, it's a bedroom. I see two girls, two teenagers, I guess 13 or 14 years old. One is lying on the floor, one is lying on a bed. One on the floor, she's lying on her stomach. Her pants are pulled down towards her knees. And there's a bullet wound on the backside of her neck near her head. And there's a puddle of blood around her head. And there's remains of semen on the lower part of her back.
G says the other teenage girl also appeared to have been assaulted.
There's a bullet wound on the upper part of her chest, and there's bruises all over her body. So, these are two girls that were just killed, executed, perhaps also raped in their own bedroom.
Israeli police say the bodies at Shura, one of a handful of sites where dead bodies are brought for identification, show trauma consistent with rape and assault. Morgue workers say these women did not die peaceful deaths.
Some of the women came in just with underwear, and the underwear was often bloody. Some of them had underwear on that was very bloody, and that was very difficult to see also. We also saw most of the women were shot at least once in the body, but then they were shot in the head, and they were shot in the head many times. And it often seemed to be gratuitous cruelty, abject cruelty, because it seemed to have been done just to mutilate them. The women we saw were not just killed, they were cruelly, cruelly mutilated. in many parts of their bodies.
Women's groups say the humiliation women experienced as they were paraded through the street, thrown on the backs of motorcycles, and degraded either before or after they were killed at the festival, that also constitutes gender-based violence. Here's what one Nova Festival organizer told us that he saw.
What we found in the area, on the field, outside the safe zone, there is not a doubt about what our girls went through, the terrorists. We found naked women stripped out without any clothes. Their legs were spread out. And some of them were butchered.
Israeli police acknowledge that the investigation is likely to take months. Tuesday, police held a press briefing in which one witness said she saw a gang rape. Quote, "They bent someone over, and I understood he was raping her. And then he was passing her on to someone else. She was alive. She stood on her feet and she was bleeding from her back. I saw that he was pulling her hair. She had long brown hair. I saw him chop off her breast. And then he was throwing it toward the road, tossed it to someone else, and they started playing with it. I remember seeing another person raping her, and while he was still inside her, he shot her in the head." Another shocking part of all of this to these women and investigators, the absence of international outrage, including a United Nations statement a week after these terrorist attacks that did not mention these accusations at all, as if the rape of Israeli women does not count as rape.
It's much worse than just silence or an insult to us as Israeli women and to our children and to our people. It's when they are failing to acknowledge what happened here, they are failing humanity.
Why would it be that the international community and the United Nations would be silent about these crimes? They seem to be vocal about so much else.
So given that these attacks undeniably happened, you'd think that UN Women would be among the loudest voices speaking out against what happened on October 7th. Well, no.
UN Women is deeply alarmed at the disturbing reports of gender-based and sexual violence on October 7th. And as we've said in the Security Council and through various platforms, we absolutely, unequivocally condemn all forms of violence against women and girls, especially in the context of conflict. As you just heard Ruth say, this is never acceptable. And gender-based violence as a weapon of war is totally reprehensible. Certainly, we have called from the beginning for the need to protect civilians, including and especially women and girls in the context of this conflict. And we've called for the need for any allegations of gender-based atrocities to be fully investigated with the utmost priority.
Is there a reason, though, Sarah, that you can't specifically call out Hamas and the mounting evidence now over 7 weeks that Israeli investigators have collected that we've shown our viewers about the atrocities they committed specifically on October 7th? Because I think that's the crux of the issue here. It's not just condemning sexual violence against women and in any war in general. It's specifically what occurred on October 7th, perpetrated by Hamas.
Indeed. UN Women always supports impartial, independent investigations into any serious allegations of gender-based or sexual violence. And within the UN family, these investigations are led by the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. And just to provide a little bit of context in terms of UN Women's role, UN Women specifically provides and has extensive knowledge on gender-based violence and provides and supports investigations as we do with all UN investigations. And so consequently, in this context and within the UN system, it is the Independent International Commission of Inquiry, which for us has the mandate to investigate all alleged violations. It is absolutely important for the rights, for the needs, for the protection, for the dignity, for the survivors of violence to be supported throughout a process. And that's why we work through these globally mandated mechanisms. That notwithstanding, we understand and certainly we encourage and support national level efforts, the ones that you've heard about today, the Civil Commission in Israel, which has brought together women's organizations to document gender-based atrocities impartially. Our work will be on the backside of the Independent International Commission.
Which is weird when this is how UN Women describe themselves. UN Women is the United Nations entity dedicated to gender equality and the empowerment of women, a global champion for women and girls. UN Women was established to accelerate progress on meeting their needs worldwide. What we're really seeing now is just more of the pro-Hamas All Lives Matter bullshit we've seen in every direction, where when it comes to Jews, people just can't let themselves call out Hamas without also talking about Palestinian civilians, or Islamophobia, or all women, as if all women were targeted on October 7th, when in reality, only Israeli women were targeted by Hamas. But this is totally on brand when you look into what UN Women has done since October 7th. Their first tweet on X on October 7th was this from the Executive Director of UN Women. The escalation of hostilities in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory is gravely concerning. It is imperative that all civilians, including women and girls, are protected. We call for immediate de-escalation and for upholding and respecting international humanitarian law. On October 7th, when nothing had happened in Gaza yet. All Lives Matter, after a few random posts about Afghanistan, Ethiopia, and trans lesbians being lesbians too, they didn't post about it until October 13th, condemning the attacks on civilians in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. Reminder, Gaza isn't occupied. All Lives Matter. And to sum up the clown show that is the UN, the executive director posted this on October 17th. We strongly condemn the strike on Al-Ali Arab Hospital in Gaza that killed and injured hundreds of civilians. International humanitarian law and human rights law must be respected and upheld. Civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected. Hospitals are not a target. This tweet is still up. Even though it wasn't an Israeli strike, it was Islamic Jihad. Hundreds weren't killed or injured, it was more like 50 killed. And it wasn't the hospital, it was a parking lot. Also, no comment on the fact that these hospitals are being used as Hamas headquarters. And if you keep scrolling on their timeline, it's endless All Lives Matter or direct support for one side, the Palestinians. But this is what UN Women is all about. On Google, when you search UN Women, this is what comes up. A sponsor post, so they're paying for this to be headlined. Women and girls in Gaza are enduring attacks and displacement. Read our impact statement. UN Women's statement, War in Gaza, Humanitarian Situation in Gaza. Donate for women in Gaza. Support women and girls. Support UN Women. When you go to their website, here are the first posts you'll see. In focus, the conflict in Gaza. Voices from Gaza. Norhan's story of survival amid airstrikes. Facts and figures. Women and girls during the war in Gaza. The bottom of the page has another area to donate, only to women in Gaza. Please donate today to protect and support women and their families in the Gaza crisis. UN Women has been supporting Palestinian women since 1997 to achieve their social, economic, and political rights. We remain present on the ground to provide support and assistance, and will do so for as long as it takes. Apparently, Israeli women just don't deserve your support. And if you search for Hamas on the UN Women website, you get 5 results since October 7th. 5. Brief. UN Women Palestine 6-month response framework. In focus, the conflict in Gaza. Press release. UN Women report reveals devastating impact of the crisis in Gaza on women and girls. UN Women rapid assessment and humanitarian response in the occupied Palestinian territory. Facts and figures. Women and girls during the war in Gaza. Notice anything missing? For anyone paying attention, we already know that the UN has a double standard when it comes to Israel. Last year, there was one UN resolution criticizing Iran, Syria, North Korea, Myanmar, and the US, because why not? There were 6 for Russia. There were none for China, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Cuba, Turkey, Egypt, Zimbabwe, Pakistan, Qatar, Vietnam, Algeria, or 175 other countries, despite widespread human rights violations. The UN passed 15 resolutions criticizing Israel just last year. So it's hardly surprising that the UN's Department for Equality for Women doesn't think that equality applies to Israeli women and girls raped and tortured and mutilated and paraded around like trophies by Hamas on October 7th. Because, as David Baddiel put it in his amazing book that you should really check out, Jews don't count.